Great. Yes, hello everyone, and thank you very much for this opportunity. My main affiliation is the European Commission's Joint Research Center now. An earlier presenter introduced what the GRC is, so I won't spend much time on that. Thank you, Marco. We'll be talking to you about our work on the international trade of hydrogen and hydrogen-derived fuels. So this links quite nicely to especially to the last two presentations on a more systemic view of the energy system and the decarbonization challenges. What is the motivation here? Well, you all know about hydrogen and the fact that it can play a role in low emissions economy. But where hydrogen comes from will depend on the competition between the cost of producing it locally versus importing it. So what is new here in this work that I will be presenting is that we analyze hydrogen trade prospects based on a fully implemented global trade model of hydrogen within a global energy system model. All aspects of the energy system are modeled dynamically here. Not just the hydrogen production part, not just the hydrogen demand part, and not just hydrogen, but all energy fuels. The work that I'm presenting is based on the GRC's Global Energy and Climate Outlook report of 2022 that you can find in this link. But this particular work has been updated since then with more recent information in 23 and 2024, and it's a forthcoming publication that will be published, I expect, really in the coming weeks. It's already been accepted. So a small introduction of the work that me and my team are doing. The Global Energy and Climate Outlook already reached its 10th edition with the 2024 report. It's an annual publication where we look at regional, country level and regional and global energy and emission projections under different scenarios. And we use that as an advice to the European Commission's climate diplomacy activities in international climate negotiations. In each report, we take a deep dive into a specific topic that we look at, national determined contributions, updates, impacts of COVID on transport trends. And in 2022, in particular, we looked at hydrogen trade and energy trade and decarbonization scenarios. So this is what I will be presenting. This work is done within the POLS GRC model. POLS is a global energy system model that covers all types of energy fuels and vectors, from production, trade, transformation, and consumption, alongside with the accompanying greenhouse gas emissions that come out of it. So it's a global multi-regional model. It has endogenously produced energy prices internationally and regionally. It has been used in several assessments to 2050, but we run actually the model all the way to 2100 to assess scenarios that include policies to stabilize climate change to a certain level. So the scenarios I will be presenting to you today consist in these three. The reference scenario is one where we have looked at legislated policies for all countries around the world for energy and emissions, also looking at air quality. So this is our not quite a business as usual, but rather a reference scenario against which we evaluate additional policies to limit emissions in particular. Then the other two are two stylized scenarios where there is a global concerted effort to reduce emissions. So the 2-degree scenario, we have a least cost global energy emissions trajectory to limit warming to 2 degrees by the end of the century, following the Paris Agreement of the UNFCCC. This is done with a global carbon price that increases gradually from today onwards with an kind of a sigmoid shape, an S shape from today to 2100. Why is it stylized? Is because we have this global carbon price. It's a least cost scenario. In the real world, of course, there would be much more um, details on what each country does. And then the 1.5 degree scenario, which is really trying to pull all the levers to a max to limit emissions in the long term, but also in the short to medium term, to limit emissions as much as possible to respect this 1.5 degree constraint. We do exceed that constraint in the medium term. We have a temperature overshoot temporarily, and it seems to us very difficult to avoid that in our setup. So I'll directly go to some results first on hydrogen demand, and then talk to you about the hydrogen trade module. First of all, we project hydrogen and e-fuels to account for a rather small share of the overall final energy demand, even in the 1.5 degree scenario. In all of our scenarios, over time, we have hydrogen demand increasing. And we also see, if we compare the scenarios with each other, that as the climate ambition increases, demand of these fuels increases. No big surprise there. What is interesting is that if we look at the overall energy system that you have here, final energy consumption of fuels for hydrogen, it's just about 3%. For the synthetic fuels, these e-fuels, so hydrogen-derived fuels together with CO2 captured from the air and produced into either gaseous methane, gaseous fuels, or liquid e-fuels with Fischer-Tropsch, account for about 7% of the final energy mix. And we also have ammonia that is used in shipping, accounting for about 2%. But by and large, what is the largest vector in final energy consumption is electricity. And this is the main way with which we achieve emission reductions, by electrifying the energy system on the one hand and expanding the electricity production with renewables in particular. So hydrogen and e-fuels account for a small share of final energy demand, even in very constrained scenarios. They are also used in very specific cases. Today we use hydrogen as a feedstock in various processes, in refineries, in producing nitrogen-based fertilizers, and in the chemical sector. In the future, with the constraint of decarbonizing the energy system, new uses for hydrogen will emerge, and in particular in the transport sector. The transport sector accounts for 3/4 of total hydrogen demand by 2050 in the 1.5 scenario. And most of that actually goes into transforming hydrogen into a different fuel that is itself then used in transport. So e-fuels and ammonia, as we said. We also have hydrogen in steel making, but that's a rather small part of the overall hydrogen demand. Most of it is related to hard to abate mobile sectors. Okay, on the hydrogen production side, we represent some 13 technologies to produce hydrogen. Today, the dominant production technology is steam methane reforming. In China, there's also coal gasification. And what we have is that in our projections, we have progressively the increasing reliance on low emissions technologies. So still using fossil fuels together with CCS, carbon capture, to produce blue hydrogen. This would be the low emissions fossil fuel part. And this is quite important in the 2-degree scenario. In the 1.5 degree scenario, because of the fact that blue hydrogen still has some residual emissions, we are rather switching directly to other forms of hydrogen, either biomass pyrolysis or biomass gasification, quite intensive in terms of biomass resources, but it can generate negative emissions when we couple it with carbon capture. Nuclear-based hydrogen, and then green hydrogen with standalone capacities for photovoltaics or wind, or using the grid when there's wind and solar oversupply. So these green hydrogen technologies are quite costly. They come in gradually, and by 2050 actually, we need a lot of wind and solar in addition to wind and solar for electricity production to satisfy the demand for producing hydrogen and e-fuels. Now, coming over to the actual hydrogen international trade module. This was a new model development as of 2 years ago. And what we have is that starting from the top here, we start from hydrogen demand in each country. We have a demand that is faced from the international markets. On the other hand, we have hydrogen production capacities per technology in each country. And we have the production costs that are detailed for each technology. On the one hand, we have the transport costs for each transport option. We distinguish onshore and offshore pipelines and ship-based transport, either with liquefied hydrogen, cryogenic hydrogen, and then reconverted back into gaseous hydrogen at the port of reception, or conversion into ammonia and cracking back into hydrogen at the port of reception. So several techno-economic parameters that feed into the different supply costs for each trade route. And so we have a cost minimization logic for each time step that generates the new trade allocation. Important to note is that we have also trade contract lifetimes that are distinguished between whether we are considering pipelines, which have longer contract lifetimes, or ships, which are more flexible, similar to the LNG market. And so that also feeds into the dynamics of existing trade legacy from the previous time step and what new trade is generated with each time step. All right, I'll directly go into some results and then explain to you why we have these. So on a global scale, international trade of hydrogen provides actually a small share of hydrogen supply. The actual volume of trade increases over time, but it is only a small share that is traded. In the 1.5 degree scenario, by 2030, we trade 10% of hydrogen, and by 2050, actually less, only 6%. This is here. That means that the bulk of global hydrogen demand is met only by domestic production. Actually, since we also allow the trade of liquid e-fuels, these are much more easy to transport and there are less losses. So in energy terms, liquid e-fuels trade overtakes hydrogen trade very quickly. And by 2050, it's actually twice the market size in energy terms. How is this hydrogen transported? Well, the bulk of it comes via pipeline trade between close and neighboring regions. This is the red part here. Only 1% of global trade it comes by ship in the 1.5 degree scenario. So this is an important thing to keep in mind when we are thinking about all this hydrogen related announcements on expanding infrastructure for transporting hydrogen over transoceanic distances, for instance. So if we map this, what does it look like? Now, Pulse has 66 countries and regions. We have grouped this here in these maps into country groupings, 10 country groupings, I think, in order to make this more readable. But what we have is that, first of all, we distinguish the trade of purely green hydrogen so based on PV and wind, versus low carbon blue hydrogen based on fossil fuels with CCS. The more we have climate ambition, the importance of green hydrogen trade increases. So in the 2-degree scenario, we have a lot of low carbon trade, low carbon hydrogen trade. In the 1.5-degree scenario, we have more green hydrogen trade. What is happening is that the higher climate ambition pushes the production of green hydrogen, and this results in a less developed global infrastructure for hydrogen trade, actually. So what you see is that also the overall volumes of hydrogen trade in the 2-degree scenario are higher than the overall volume traded volumes in the 1.5-degree scenario. So we actually have less trade in the 1.5, despite the fact that we have more hydrogen demand in the 1.5. Why is that? So in the 1.5-degree scenario, there is a lot of accelerated technological learning because of this push to reduce emissions as quickly as possible, because of the deployment of low carbon technologies that is happening faster. So what that means is that the comparative advantage of importing hydrogen becomes smaller. So the cost gap between producing it domestically versus importing it becomes smaller over time. For low carbon hydrogen, so CCS based, the cost differentials are kept essentially between the 2-degree and the 1.5 because there is not that much learning actually. So we have more green hydrogen trade as a proportion, but less trade overall in the 1.5. Same maps now, but not looking at green versus low carbon, but shipping versus pipeline. Well, as I said earlier, pipelines handle most of the global hydrogen trade in both scenarios. You can see this here in North Africa to Europe, for instance, Russia to China in particular in the 2-degree scenario. But there is some shipping happening also in the 2-degree scenario, in particular Russia to Asia, Southeast Asia, and also even North Africa to Europe. And reforming economies to Europe. In the 1.5-degree scenario, the volumes are again smaller, and we have some pipeline trade and much less shipping happening. So I'll zoom into Europe since this is much of much interest for us. Again, this is true in Europe as well. The bulk of hydrogen supply is met by intra-regional EU production. So there is a lot of domestic production of hydrogen in all scenarios. So with hydrogen that is produced and consumed within each country. And then there is a part of it that is traded within the EU, considering pipelines here. Then there is only a small share that is met by imports outside of the EU, and most of that comes from regions that are quite close. Switzerland and Norway, rest of Balkans, Northern Africa, and essentially very little from anywhere else. So this is also important to consider when we are talking about energy corridors between regions. So I promised you some explanation of why we have this. Here we have a breakdown of the costs of hydrogen transport from a number of regions to a representative country of the EU, here Germany. On the left here you have the shipping routes, so hydrogen, liquefied hydrogen ship and ammonia ship, and on the right you have the pipeline. So what we see is that the conversion costs in the hydrogen ship are a big part of the additional costs. We have production cost in the country of that is exporting that might be lower than the one in that is importing, but the additional transport costs more than make up for this difference. So reconversion costs, the shipping itself with boil-off losses, harbor handling, all of these make a hydrogen ship hardly competitive. With ammonia, it could be argued that in some cases, Northern Africa, Egypt, regions that are rather close could be competitive with some, for some exports to the EU. But the further you go, it definitely becomes non-competitive. There have been some announcements for contracts between Australia and Germany, but here we project this to be highly unlikely. For the pipeline, again, there are, I mean, the cost gaps are much smaller between regions and exporting regions and importing regions. And the overhead between production cost and actual supply cost is rather small. There are fixed costs and operational costs for the dedicated hydrogen pipeline, which make imports from Northern Africa, for instance, quite competitive. I should note that these are dedicated hydrogen pipelines. We are not considering yet the conversion of existing fossil gas pipelines for hydrogen use. So finally, some conclusions from this work is that hydrogen and derived fuels are a small share of total final energy consumption when we are considering decarbonization of the global energy system. And it's rather direct electrification that is the dominant vector that reaches most of the emission reductions in a 1.5 degree compatible world. However, hydrogen and derived fuels are important decarbonization levers in a limited number of sectors, so we cannot do away with them if we really want to decrease emissions to a large extent. The bulk of hydrogen demand is met by domestic production, with most imported hydrogen coming via pipeline from neighboring regions rather than via ship. And this is, interestingly enough, reinforced with technology learning in the high climate ambition scenarios. And finally, importers prefer importing e-fuels, so the end product, rather than importing pure hydrogen that is then converted into e-fuel for mostly transportation sectors. All right, as I said, this work is a collective effort, thanks to the team here at the JRC in Seville, in Spain. Most of the hydrogen trade model work was done by Boca Chade, a colleague who is here present in the audience. And I invite you to visit our webpage to find all of these reports and the upcoming paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Keramidas.